Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78. And I'm always up for an amazing story, especially when it comes to music. I'm sure you can see the background here. This is my domain, which has been music. I've been in TV and music for basically my professional life, working in radio, now in television, with the only excuse is that I get to work with cool bands throughout that entire process. Because I can't play a lick of a note or anything, but that's why I have friends like Rob. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing great, Tom. Thanks for having me today, and this is going to be an awesome experience. So appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rob, you are the lead singer of the band The Generations, and that band newly formed based on something that you found back in your attic in Highland Park. Because we're talking to you from your studio right now, out in Highland
Yes,
Park, right?
yes, we are in the studio, and you can see all the instruments behind me. So what happened was a really interesting story. Back in 1985, I
Hmm.
recorded two of my songs professionally in Chicago. And those two songs, at the end of the session, the engineer came up to me with, and I'll show you. This is kind of cool because Kate always asks me for this. So
Oh, look at
these
that.
these were the actual tapes that he gave me. And I'll open one of them up. You see that?
Old reel to reel, my friend.
Reel to reel. So back in the 80s, you had reel to reel. And what was interesting about that is that the engineer proudly gave me these at the end of our session. And he said, "Here you go, Rob. Have fun with your songs." I said, "Victor, how am I going to listen to these things? Because I don't have a reel to reel player." And he goes, "You'll just figure it out." And
That was
so,
excuse of not my problem.
right. Not my problem. You go figure it out.
Yeah.
So I came home dejected. I put them in a box and I forgot about them.
Was
And
this all
38
after
years,
you? Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Sorry.
No, I said 38 years later, I was rummaging around in my attic and I came across this box. And I opened up the box and there were my tapes. It was like finding a musical time capsule in my attic. And so I got really excited. I called a friend of mine, Jim Perkowitz, who's also a musician.
Hmm.
And I said, "Jim, what do I do? I found these tapes. I've got to restore them. They've been in my attic for 38 years. And I'd love to hear them. I'd like to digitize them." Because, back then was analog. This is digital. You saw
Yeah.
the tapes. So Jim says, "I got a guy." I
Very
said,
Chicago of them.
"Yes, very Chicago." And everybody has a guy, right,
Yeah, sure
Tom?
do.
So,
Absolutely.
so I said, "Okay, great. Introduce me to your guy." And he introduced me to Steve Albini.
Who's not just a guy, right? Like this is a music legend in the
Yes.
recording industry, especially here in Chicago. I mean, he worked with like the band that you're wearing as your hat, right? Like he worked with Nirvana. It's a
Nirvana.
Nirvana hat you got on, right? Am I reading that
Yeah,
right?
I got their Nirvana. He
Yeah.
actually, produced in utero. He worked with the Generations,
Yep.
my
Absolutely. Great
band.
band. Uh-huh.
Yes, and he actually worked with more than Nirvana. He was iconic, to your point, Tom. He worked with Foo Fighters. He worked
Yep.
with Page and Plant from Zeppelin. He did some stuff with Cheap Trick, the Pixies, PJ Harvey. So this guy was legendary, and it was just such a thrill and such an honor for myself and my band to have him record our album.
And I imagine because I've heard a lot about Steven. Unfortunately, he passed earlier this
Yeah.
year,
Yes.
but left a legacy nonetheless. Joe Shanahan is a gentleman that I've talked to about him before, who owns the Metro, who had a good relationship with him, respecting what he did in the music industry. But that's like that legacy he left. People, you would say his name, like Dave Grohl, or even back in the day, Kurt Cobain, and people would be like, "Oh yeah, Electric Audio in Chicago." Yeah, I mean, I heard he was he was like no BS, no bullshit kind of a Chicago guy when it came down to music and frilly playing and kind of, he was more about like you're making a rock record, make a rock record. Or if you're going to make this record, make this record. Don't add all this crap to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he was a ferocious champion of preserving that purity that you're referring to. And what he would do is he would want to preserve what we were doing in his studio and make it a live sound. So as an example, my drummer Adam Grace, came in with his drum kit and he's setting up, and Steve is going around Adam with about 12 or 14 microphones.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm like, wow, this is how he got this incredible drum sound from Dave Grohl when he produced Nirvana. And he just captured such a live version of what we were doing. And I just think it's great that he liked that raw, type of music coming out. To your point, Tom.
You said 14 microphones for just the drums?
Just a drum kit.
Wow,
yes.
that's incredible.
Well,
was it
they were on his cymbals, they were on his drums, they were on the floor, they were in back of him, they were in front. I mean, I couldn't believe it.
was it a little intimidating working with somebody like Steve when you brought these tapes in, not hearing them for like almost 40 years, where you're like, I'm pretty sure I remember what these sound like, but here you go, Steve. You hear it, you play it, help me restore it, and then we're going to record an album. Like, how does that had to be a little scary to work, and also really exciting.
So when I met Steve and I took in these tapes, he wasn't confident that he could restore them. He said,
Just because of
Rob,
the age?
yeah, he said they're so old. I have to, number one, I have to bake them. I got to get all the moisture out of the tapes. And he said, I'll call you in a month. And he did. And he said, good news, come on down. I restored them. I digitized them. They sound amazing. I want to talk to you about it. And then during our conversation, he said, the tapes that you brought in were never mastered. So we have to master those. And then my recommendation would be get a 2023 version of your band, get some new players, vet them out, bring them in, and then we'll record and I'll get them mastered as well. We mastered them through Chicago Mastering Service. Bob Weston actually played in shellac. He played the bass in shellac, and Steve played guitar in shellac. And so Bob did an incredible job mastering. And then I said to these guys, I said, hey, can I make a vinyl album? And they said, sure, we'll send it over to Third Man Records in Detroit, Michigan. And I said, okay, that sounds
Jack
good.
White studio, or
Jack
outfit.
White Jack White from the White Stripes. So those guys pressed the album and got the album back to me. Let's see, I think I have a copy. This is the album.
How cool is that, man?
Yes. And then right here, I don't know if you can see, that's Steve Albini with the band.
Look at that. I mean, it took a couple of years, but you finally got it there, huh? Couple say 24, 25 years, huh?
Right. So we did that. And, after thinking about the event of a record release party, I thought, I've got to contribute to a charity. Mm-hmm. I'm always using music as a vehicle to help 501c3s. And this time, like last year, I did pediatric brain cancer, and our band and a few other bands raised about $120,000 for pediatric brain cancer. This year, we changed the strategy, and I said, I need to do something that involves music and mm-hmm. kids, music and children. And so that's when we found Joey's song.
Very cool stuff. I mean, for somebody who hasn't looked at something or heard something like that, to then bring it to somebody who sees that all the time, that journey itself, just getting out of your attic, into the car, driving over there, dropping them off, and then just waiting for this magician to resurrect music that has been lost through time, now back here front and center. What was it like when you first heard it, when you walked into that studio and he played it for you? Tell me what that was like for you.
Well, he was amazing because, he, again, this no nonsense type of guy. And, my reaction was a mixture. Tom.
Okay. That's fair.
It was excitement. I felt exhilarated. It was also nostalgia. because nowadays everybody loves the 80s, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of made this
Isn't that funny how that
resurgence.
works?
Yeah, it all comes full circle, right? But it was incredible to hear those songs, to be honest with you, after all these years. The experience was like reconnecting with a long lost part of myself, to be honest with you. And it
Sure, I
inspired me to
understand it.
take action, to bring those songs, to have like a fresh perspective. And so I knew that Steve would definitely help with that.
So the version of yourself that made those and walked out of the recording studio back in 1980, was it 85 you said?
85, yeah.
Yeah. What has changed the most between that version of you and the music and the bandmates you played with then versus today with the generations? Because I know you had a record release party at Dirty Nelly's. You have another big holiday show coming up here as well. What's the biggest difference? What did you do in those two bookend moments there?
Which is a great question. So let's go back in time to the mid
Yeah.
80s.
Get back in our DeLorean.
Yes. Turn on Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So when I had a bunch of friends, and all these friends were helping me out, and we formed this band.
Mhm.
And we were a close knit group of musicians that, those sessions were some of the most creative sessions and fulfilling for me, because at that time, I was really young, and the creative juices were flowing. So the original recordings captured the essence of that collective, energy and collaboration with that band. So everybody was just a friend of mine
Mhm.
that I had in this band.
Where were you playing
Yes.
at that time?
So I played. It's awesome because I played all keyboards, and I got to get you. Did we get you a copy of that album? I don't
No,
know
not
if
yet, but I would love to
they
hear it.
did.
I mean, I got
Yeah.
vinyl right behind me, as you can see. I got a few.
Okay, I'll get you a copy. And so I played all keyboards.
Okay.
Fast forward to 23, I played all guitar. I played rhythm guitars, and I had somebody else play lead guitars on the album.
And where were you? Where were the gigs back in the day? Like, where were you play? You remember certain neighborhoods? Were you up in Highland Park back then? Where were you?
No, back then I grew up in Skokie.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm right by
then,
Superdog.
yeah, not that far.
I'm down the street from there.
Yeah, so we would play, around that area. There's a bunch of bars, and then I moved to Palatine, and so then I played a bunch of bars around in that area. But now we're being very strategic. We have a promoter, Joey DeMarco, and he's promoting the band in these really cool clubs like a Dirty Nelly's, like a 28 Mile in Highwood, that are more upscale type of clubs that we can bring a bunch of people in. We're not diluting the band's brand. Not playing every week, not playing every month, but every 2-3 months you can come out and hear the Generations rock.
That's awesome. And for the bookend, that is what you got this holiday show coming up here.
Yes.
Is it this month or is it next month in December?
It's actually December 28th.
That's what I thought. Okay, so almost a New Year's show almost.
Yeah, it's between Christmas and New Year's. To your point, we wanted to do a holiday show. We are raising donations for Joey's Song again. Joey's Song is, into raising money for pediatric epilepsy and regular epilepsy. And so that is near and dear to my heart because the founder, Mike Gamal, his son Joe tragically passed away at the age of 5 from a rare form of pediatric epilepsy. And so he could have, just hung it up back then, 14 years ago. However, he decided to keep Joe's memory alive and do something good, paying it forward, and helping communities really research this epilepsy. And it's not just that rare form; it's all of epilepsy.
Sure.
He's got donations and grants, and so every year he actually, which is really cool, he gets artists together to help raise donations. This year, I think it's called Freezing Man. That's the name of the concert. It's every January. This year, he's got people from Cheap Trick there, the Goo Goo Dolls, the Go-Go's, the Bangles, Toto. I think he's trying to get Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins. And so we were a precursor to this.
Yeah.
And he's invited all, myself and the band up there to kind of hang with all the musicians, but they do a great job. Oh, Garbage, Butch Vig from Garbage, who competed against Albini, way back, in time. They, because Butch did, one album for Nirvana,
Hmm.
the hat, and then Albini did the other one.
Man, oh man, a lot of fun. That sounds like an incredible lineup of people. And you're not mentioning like Joe Schmoes there. You know what I
No,
mean? You mentioned Butch Vig, Toto, which is like a super group of like super talented musicians. I'm born in 1980, but I have a love. I mean, my favorite movie it might be of all time is Real Genius, that took place in the 80s, that has one of the best soundtracks, I think, that is completely underrated. And
yes,
Lost Boys and Back to the Future and so on and so forth. I have a love of the 80s. My song that reminds me of my kids is Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which was their first concert with Tears for Fears. So I appreciate all that you're talking about here. It is speaking my language for a great cause. Um, when we were talking earlier about the mastering of the tapes, for those who don't know what that means, what does it mean to master a tape? And talk about like where your tape was and what they needed to do to get it mastered.
So my tape originally got to a certain level where all the output was basically the two songs. It was never ready to be put on a CD or an album or even cassette tapes back then.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't make it, the next level of mastering would be to make sure that all the sounds, all everything was in unison and synchronized together and blended together and mixed together properly. I mean, they mix it down, but they never get to that next level. So it's a little bit rawer in form. When you master something, you get that high fidelity. And so what happened this time around, before we mastered everything, I had to sit down with a few band members and we had to go through all of the tapes before we submitted it to the mastering company, and then they mastered and sent it to Third Man Records, at which point Third Man Records sent it back to us, and we had to listen to every single album. They sent us like 5 test albums, Tom.
Wow.
And the reason being is that they're mass producing this stuff. Okay. And so maybe, they do it first thing in the morning and they mass produce it. And next thing you hear snap, crackle, pop. Well, there's certain, snaps that are okay.
Sure.
But then, there's certain things that in the grooves of the album that are not okay. And so what we have to do is we have to approve the final versions, and you have to listen to every single song, and you have to get any type of imperfections or anything that is disrupting the natural, sound of the music. And so that whole process was, it was interesting. It's an arduous process. It was totally cool for
Sounds
me
like it.
because
Yeah.
I learned something new, and so did my band members. And I'll tell you something, that we did a panel discussion on how you make a vinyl record in today's landscape at the record release party, and it was so educational. I had my bass player, my drummer on the panel. I had Mac from Electrical Audio, Lauren McDonald. She learned from Albini, when he was alive, and she's a protege of him. And then we also had Andre Daniels, who's he works, in a non-for-profit, Guitars Over Guns, but he's also on the Grammy Awards Governor's Board, and he was given his perspective on, how do you make an album today? And so I'm kind of dumbing it down for this conversation,
Sure.
but if
Yeah.
you really wanted to go deep into it, I can send you the video of that session.
That's fascinating. I mean, do you think it's harder now to make a vinyl record album versus 1985?
Yeah, I think it was probably a lot easier. It's so much more intricate now. There's so different technologies that are
Yeah.
going on now. We wanted to be pure, so the one thing that Steve did, he always recorded the tape. So
Yeah,
here's a
that
cool
sounds like old
story.
school.
Yeah, here's a cool story for you. When we were at Steve's place, so it's a different process as opposed to just I'm going to do digital on Pro Tools or
Mhm.
or Logic on my computer, because then if you make a mistake, Tom, you could just wipe it out on your computer and okay, it's gone.
Mhm.
What Steve did is, one of the players made a mistake, during one of our cuts, and he actually took a knife or I think a razor blade and
Mhm.
cut out a rectangle of the tape and patched it in, and you can't hear it anymore. And all
Wow.
three of us, our jaws dropped. They're like, this guy is a magician. He just heard it. He's so spot on, and I couldn't believe it, and neither could any of us.
And just to see that happen in real time, I mean, that's just a something that a whole generation, unfortunately, of musicians might not ever see. So you guys got to see
Right.
that as it's more of a niche thing now, like you're saying, versus recording on the very device that I'm talking to you on, which is a MacBook or something like that, where you can record Pro Tools and all that stuff. Um, between
Think
the
about back then, like in the 60s or even 60s when they first started recording on records. Think about the Beatles. They're recording on 4 tracks.
Yeah,
That
and
was
they had
it.
to do it over and over and over to get it right.
Yes,
I
yes.
was
And
I
and
was
so today, to your point, you can get 24, 48 tracks, whatever it is, and there's so much fine tuning to this process.
Yeah, I was up at Chess Records on Michigan Avenue on
Yeah.
Chicago's South Side, and they had a story about Willie Dixon, who was like the resident blues player and producer and the whole thing. And there's a story that they tell about how he made Chuck Berry record Johnny B. Good, practice, not even record, practice it 48 times until he allowed him to record it, because that's how much he needed him to work on it. And you're talking about Chuck Berry here. You're not talking, it's Chuck Berry 48 times to practice. So it's like, you hear that now and you're like, man, oh man, because you see a band on stage, and I'm sure you've seen bands on stage or even heard music, and you're like, that could be a little bit better than it is. You know what I mean? Like, I know they're
Yes.
trying and all that, but that could be a little bit better. And I'm trying to be nice about the whole process, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you hear that, and then you hear about stories like that, and the Beatles and the Stones, who came up in the era of, you just got to get it right. You got to do it until you do it right. Like, I can't imagine that now. We have all these ways to circumvent that process, but nonetheless, it's good stories to tell.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks for sharing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sorry. Go on tangents. For those who are not familiar with your work, like, is being in the music industry your day job, or do you have something else that you do completely, that you did completely for all those years, and you kind of just did stuff on the side and then decided to come up and do this band, The Generations, where you have different types of folks that fill into that? What were you doing in all those years prior?
So the generations and what I do musically is more of a passion for me.
Hmm.
It is not my day job. My day job, I work for an amazing professional human resources company called Insperity. We are in a PEO lane, professional employer organization. And so that's what I do every single day. It was interesting. Somebody recently asked me, they said, hey, what if this takes off? And, are you going to make this, your career and all that? I said, well, let's go back in time. Let's go back to when I was 17 or 18 years old. Back then, I had a friend who was the road manager, and I don't know if you remember her. Her name was Angela Bofield. She was a jazz singer, pop
Hmm.
singer. And
Sure.
he was a road manager for her. And he, you know, remember, like early 80s, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have internet. There's no,
We had the
nothing like what we're doing today.
payphones and mail.
Right. It was snail mail, and it was like, hey, gotta call on payphone or your house. And so he said, yeah, I just got the call from a company called Showco, and I recommended you to them. I said, to do what? He goes, why don't you talk to them? And so I interviewed with Showco over the phone, and they said, yeah, we'd like you to come out to California at our headquarters. We want to do like a deep dive, submit your application. I'm like, this is so cool. And I said, what kind of bands do you guys, are you with? They said, well, yeah, we do, we did Led Zeppelin, we do Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, Bad Company. And I was like psyched. I'm like,
Yeah,
how
those
much
are
do
some
you
big
think?
ones.
They said, yeah, we have a spot open on the Rolling Stones, road crew for you. And they did sound and lights, for all those bands that I
Oh,
mentioned.
wow.
So I hung up. I talked to my parents. I said, I got this amazing opportunity, Mom and Dad. You're not going to believe it. I just have to fly out to LA. I
Hmm.
have to interview with Shoko. And I told them who Shoko was. And they looked at me and they said, absolutely not.
Being the Midwestern parents that they are, huh?
Yep. And my mom says to me, if you want to work for Shoko after you go to college, that's fine. But you're going to college, Rob. And so to your point, hey, what are you doing these days? What did you do? I I had my opportunity, for stardom, so
Hmm.
to speak, to be on one of those crews, and who knows what that would have ignited, but it certainly wouldn't have um, given me the opportunity to work with companies I work with, like the Quaker Oats companies and others, and obviously Insperity. I never would have came to this journey, and I'm just so thrilled that I am. And now I could do both. I could do my day job, and then at night and on the weekends, I just rock out with my band.
Yeah, and we get to see you and the band, the Generations, here on December 28th. Where are you guys playing?
We are playing 28 Mile Distilling in Highwood on Sheridan Road. And so, yeah, the show starts, doors open at 7:30. The charity will go on at 8 and probably talk 20, 30 minutes, and band will start rocking at 8:45. So hopefully you can make it, Tom. We would love to have you there.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm always up for some nostalgic music and a great venue. I've been to that venue before. It's a lot of fun. And, to see the band and talk really quick about the band, if you would, just because we haven't mentioned them outside of the name too much, but it's kind of a mixture of people that that have made up this band that have gone on this journey with you.
Absolutely. So Adam Grace is my drummer. He's been drumming, I think, all of his life. He's a really talented musician. Janet Jones plays keyboard. She sings. Her husband plays bass in the band. He plays, and he also sings. Michael plays guitar, cop sing, and he plays lead guitar. I play rhythm guitar, and we also have a incredible female vocalist,
I noticed
Emmy
that. Yeah.
Fukuda. So Emmy Fukuda, she plays with the Gingers, and she has like three other bands outside. So she has like four bands, and then she's playing with us, singing lead. But she not only sings, but she can play guitar, she can play bass, she can play keyboard, she plays flute, and so very multi-talented. And then Heather Bennett sings background vocals, and so that rounds out the whole band.
Man, what a journey and what a story to tell. And from the young version of yourself to now a little wiser, we'll say, right, where you have all that life in between, and you get to just do your thing that gave you that passion when you were a kid that almost made you leave the Midwest. But nonetheless, your music stayed, and so is the album that came out in October, correct?
Yes, it was launched October 6th. My parents would have been very proud if they were alive. They actually were the core of how I got to this point in my life musically, because we had a musical household, and
Mm.
my mom played accordion, she played keyboards, piano. She also sang. She sang beautiful harmonies. My dad played upright bass. He sang. My Unfortunately, I don't sing. I sing maybe a little background vocals. But my brother and sister, they got the vocal gene, but I got all the other musical instruments. And so that's where it all started. And I'll tell you something. I'm just so blessed to have worked with all the musicians throughout my life. And this current band, they're a bunch of badass musicians, and they just rock. And it's just such an honor for me to be with them.
Well, you know what? I look forward to hearing it on vinyl coming up here soon. And thanks again. Where can people find out what you guys do? You guys have a website you guys want to tell people about?
Yeah, it's robstepenmusic.com. That's Stepen, robstepenmusic.com. You'll hear everything about where the band's going to be playing. You could buy the vinyl record, you could buy merch. We have, hats and t-shirts and hoodies and stickers, and proceeds from the album and the merch will go, part of the proceeds will go to Joey Song. And you'll see all the bios on the band members and a bunch of videos, and everything on the press. Everything that we do in the press is going to be there too. So,
Rob Stepen, it's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit here, and thanks for telling me your story. It's a great and incredible, true musical story. So thank you.
thank you, Tom. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely.